Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to our next session of reading Carl Schmitt, looking at Carl Schmitt's Parlamentarismus, which is the Crisis of Parliamentary Democracy translated by Eileen Kennedy. Um, we're looking at Chapter 2, which is on parliamentarism. Chapter 1 dealt with the democracy, its principle, and then now we're looking at the question of parliamentary. And he's divided parliamentary into five specific an introduction of it, and then five different themes of what defines parliamentarianism. And so far, we've dealt with the general concept of parliamentarism, then the openness, and then division of powers. Now we're dealing with the concept of law and legislation in parliamentarianism. Okay, that's the theme of the third part. These are going to be a little shorter. I think the videos are a little shorter than the normal ones because when I did it, I thought I was worried that it was going to be too long. I kind of panicked. I did it all together, maybe 2 hour video because this is if I go look at my chapter one video of Carl Schmitt, it's an hour. And this chapter was going to be twice as long. I didn't want to get into the 2 hour thing. I remember the preface alone went for like an hour itself. And I know people complain about that, but so that's why I did what I did here, just to kind of keep it accessible. I don't think I'm going to do that when I turn to the dictatorship, chapter 3. I think I'll just go suffer through a long video because it's just it's, it's less divisions, less clear. So the concept of law and legislation, the parliamentary conception of legislation, is already recognizable with the monarchomanians. Now, this again, the monarchomanians are these people writing in response to the rise of absolutism in continental Europe. This is Vindication Continental Europe, Beza, and other people like that. Janus Brutus is, Beza is the right to magistrates. Vindicatia Continentarus by Janus Brutus. All these. In fact, a former. I worked with a guy when I was just got my PhD. I worked in Connecticut, Central Connecticut State University, teaching in history department. Like that was weird. And there was a colleague of mine, Glenn Sunshine. Now he retired now, but in his retirement, he's been publishing volumes of new editions of these traditions, these books. And so that you can get these classics. This monarcho. This is Reformation Republican thought. This is Reformation Republican. This led to a whole idea of this. This is basically anti-Spanish, anti-Philip, Philip II in Spain, the absolutism of this, kind of also contrary to the rise of Louis Louis the Louis the 13th and the rise of his ministers of Cardinal Richelieu and the other one, I forget the name of it, and then the rise of Louis the 14th himself. Right, this is absolute monarchy. The absolute monarchy. These are the Republican voices. This is Republican, and even though there are monarchomanians. Okay, this is like, and again, now Schmitt himself has talked about this earlier in introduction, where he opposes them to the reason of state tradition. Right, so this is this whole idea here. Now, one of the other people, also the others, would be someone like not only this, but also like Milton and his with the openness of Aragopatia, which deals with freedom of speech and his. So Milton himself would be a kind of an interesting aspect of this. But let's continue here. He says, in his right of magistrate, writes the laws of magistrates, of right, the right, law or right of magistrates. Beza writes, one should not judge by cases, but by law, right? Again, this is classic, right? This is not judged by cases, but by law. That's right from Aristotle's Politics. 24, let's get this right. This. Yeah, Theodore Beza, magistrate, Calvinist politics here. All this. Kelly's note is actually useful, but I'm not going to go reading it. The Vindictica Continentarus of Janus Brutus was directed against the pernicious doctrine of Machiavelli. and displayed not only a passionate feeling for justice, but also a certain kind of rationalism. The author wanted to advance mathematical ethics and replace the concrete person of the king with an impersonal authority and a universal reason, which, according to Aristotelian scholastic tradition, constitutes the essence of law. Right? Again, this is book three. Like in book three, the famous dialogue at the ending of Politics, book three. This debate between the last four book chapters of book three deals with this debate between the law and the Pambasileia, right? The absolute king and the law. And that this is now that I argue in Book of Politics. So therefore, this Beza is relying on this Aristotelian tradition in that sense. That's transmitted via the scholastics. Okay, so even though he's a Calvinist, he's doing this. This is the Calvinistic Aristotelianism, I can say. Even though it's kind of arguing for mathematical rationalism, they look at this. They're kind of suspicious of a kind of this Jesuitical sophicism that rational could be, and prefer mathematics in that sense. So that's a weird dimension of it. A non-Aristotelian, which is not this idea of mathematical ethics, which Aristotle in his ethics would say, no, you can't do that. So therefore, there's a non-Aristotelian this of an Aristotelian tradition. Okay, so that's weird aspect of this, right? And this is why it's a Calvinist kind of doing this, right? The king must obey the law as the body obeys the soul, right? The king must obey the law as the body obeys the soul. The universal criterion of the law is deduced from the fact that law, in contradiction to will or the command of a concrete person, is only reason, not desire, and that it has no passions, whereas a concrete person, moved by a variety of particular passions, right? Again, this is that chapter footnote 25. This is a quote to Genus Brutus as tyrannical. Schmitt refers to page 115, 116 in the Edinburgh edition of the original 1517. So, okay, that's Schmidt's note there, specific. The whole of the theory of Riksdag. Okay, this is the idea. Riksdag. Riksdag is the most important concept. It's the concept we can translate it. Often translate as constitutional state. The Richt is the right. Right. This is right. Justice. Richt, right. Justice. Riksdag. The state. The Staat is the state. This Richt is the constitutional state in that sense, right? Rests on the contrast between law, which in general and already promulgated, universally binding without exception, and the validity and valid in principle for all times, and a personal order which varies case to case according to particular concrete circumstances. Now, this is this idea. The Riksdag decides between universality, which is always true, a rule that is binding always, that it's a contrast between law and what again, this is the famous distinction between law and decree, right? This is that famous law and decree. A law is universally binding over all time and place. It's universally without exception. It's valid in principle for all times. But a personal order, decree, which varies to case in particular concrete circumstances. In a well-known expedition, Otto Meyer talks about the inviolability about the law, right? This idea of the inviolability of the law. Meyer, 27 note. Again, this is his the Deutsche Vorvergalte Recht. This is one of the books dealing with the idea of right in that sense, describing this tradition. This idea of the inviolability of the law. This conception of law is based on a rationalist distinction between the no longer universal but general, right? It's no longer universal, but it's general, and the particular. And the representatives of Riksdag thinking believe that the general has a higher value in itself than the particular. This idea, in other words, this idea is that the law is absolute, and therefore the law is general, not universal anymore. No longer universal, but general. The general, like Rousseau's general will, right? The will general. Okay, that this is binding in that sense, right? But the will and the particular, the general and the particular. This again shows between the individual will and the general will, right? This tension of this, and that the higher, in other words, and the representative of Riksdag thinking believes that the general has a higher value in itself than the particular. This becomes essentially clear in the juxtaposition of law and commission, which belongs to the center of Locke's argument. So therefore, this is Locke, right? This is Locke, the idea of the juxtaposition between a law and a commission, right? In Locke's second treatise. This classical theorist of the philosophy of the Riksdag, again, this is Schmitt, saying that Schmitt argues that Locke is. So, I love this. When I hear, oh, Mr., I hear this from my Claremont friends who are all about the administrative state, that Hegel is the father of the administrative state. See, this Stadtler tradition of this Riksstaat is this about this administrative Kantian, Lockean, the Hegelian Kantian construct that is authoritarian and administrative. Okay, that Locke is the papa of the liberal rock, the classical theorist and the philosophy of the Riksdag. It is the only one example of this controversy that has gone on for more than a century over the question whether the impersonal law or the king's prerogative is sovereign. Right. This is that thing in 29 is the key example of this. And let's go look at 29 here. The note. And this is a chapter is John Fingus's. Now he quotes John Fingus's book, Divine Right of Kings, right, second edition, in that sense. Now let's continue. Even the government of the United States of America can be designated with particular emphasis as a government of laws, as contrast the government of men, right? This is that famous Adams quote, right? Footnote 30, John Marshall's opinion appears in the model of Chapter 16 in John Beck's book on the American Constitution. Schmitt refers to the translation of Beck, the American Constitution, right? Oxford, 1924, which appeared in Die Versa, appeared as Die Wasser von der Versenten Staaten von Amerika. That's a translation of Beck's book on the Constitution. A foreword by Calvin Coolidge and an introduction by Walter Simons, interim president for the Weimar Republic, and later Chief Justice of the German Supreme Court, appeared in the German edition. Chief Justice Marshall established the principle of judicial review in the American Constitution. In the last year of the Weimar Republic, Schmitt was involved in a debate with Kelsen and others on the question of defender of the Constitution, while Kelsen argued that judicial review would be the best solution to the question of which of the Republic government branches should be the authoritative interpreter of the Constitution, and thus as defender. Schmitt, after briefly sharing this point of view, argued in his De Hunter de Wasser, Defender of the Constitution, that the Reich President was best suited to defend the Constitution. And in fact, this is the very problem. You see this very day in the debate, what's going on. You see this in the very debate that you see what's happening in Israel today. So this is the question of the Constitution, the constitutional thing. Who's the supreme power? This is the danger. This is also in the power of the Polish Constitution, where in the Polish Constitution of the 1990s, 96, 97, it gives it to the president. The defender of the Constitution is the president, not the court. And there's no one unified Supreme Court in Poland. This is why I get very angry with my some of the Europeans who talk about the, oh my God, it's the front of the rule of law. No, I'm sorry. This is really sad to understand this. That it's not this. If you understand the concept, this goes back to that debate that Kelsen and Schmitt had in the 30s on this debate, and I think this is useful in this is a warning in that sense. This idea that idea that this is the rule of law above this, right? The usual definition of sovereignty today rests on Bodin's recognition that it will always be necessary to make exceptions to the general rule in concrete circumstances, and that the sovereign is whomever decides what constitutes an exception. This is that famous line from Schmitt right there in his political theology, quoting, relying on Bodin. This is why Bodin is a very important author. Again, political theology, page 4, right? The cornerstone, therefore, the cornerstone is the capstone, right? The cornerstone. The cornerstone is like the capstone's up here, the arch, right? The cornerstone that holds the building up together, right? The cornerstone, therefore, of constitutional and absolutist thought is a concept of law. The argument is, right? The concept of law. Not of course, the concept that in Germany once has called law in the formal sense ever since Leban, according to which everything that comes into existence with the agreement of the popular assembly can be called law, but rather a principle that accords with certain logical attributes. Okay, so it's not just whatever been called, since Leban. Germany, the idea is law is whatever the assembly has of a popular assembly that is law. A decree of the parliament is declared law. Law is no. Law is but rather a principle that accords with certain logical attributes. So therefore, this is this dissension here. This is that this. So not in the course of Germany. In other words, that the cornerstone of constitution and absolute thought is the law. Both of these things. Law matters. Law is the cornerstone, both of absolute thought and of constitutional thought. This is the sovereign, and that determines who is that. And that the question is that in general principles, when everything's like this, the law should rule, but in the case of this, there might have to be exceptions, right? That's the concept of exception, right? Now let's go look into this. This is Leban. Paul Leban was one of the founders of legal positivism in Germany. In that sense, this is why Leban means this idea of the German positivist tradition of that. They argued the Bonn, and the positivist argues that law is what the legislature calls it. No, this is that the law, but rather a principle that accords with certain logical attributes. The crucial distinction always remains whether the law is a general rational principle, or a measure, a concrete decree, or an order. So therefore, that's interesting. Therefore, then can legislatures issue decrees as well? And isn't the legislative act is maybe a decree because it's not a general principle in that sense. It acts as a. So there's a distinction between a decree, a law that is a rational general principle, or a measure, a concrete decree, or an order. So this is the whole thing about the difference between a law and a decree, a law and an order. And this is what he dealt with in when we looked at before, and the discussion in legality and thing that we talked about this earlier in the Schmitt paper. So go look at our previous videos on legality and legitimacy on this question of this issue in that sense. The crucial law is either a general rational principle or a measure, a decree of that. If only these regulations, which have come into effect with the cooperation and participation of the popular assembly, are called laws, then it is because the popular assembly, that is the parliament, has taken its decisions according to a parliamentary method, considering the arguments and counter arguments. The idea that the parliamentary method has been done, you have the arguments of counter arguments. But what happens when there's no discussion? What happens when the majority simply has this tight absolute control over it? So we go through the procedure, but there's no real debate. There's no real deliberation. In fact, this is the point. This is the criticism of most parliamentary, in fact, most realities of which you have multi-party, multi-list systems. You have and that you have party lists and party control and discipline control of this and strict party lines, and the enforcement mechanism of the party leadership controlling the members and how they vote. And therefore, there's no the individual members of parliament have to vote. If they don't vote that way, they can be either removed or punished. So this fight, wouldn't the system of party structure and party things ultimately lead to a contradiction here in that sense, right? He says that this is the idea. Called laws because then popular assembly this because they according to parliamentary method considering arguments counter. As a consequence, its decisions have a logically different character from that of commands, which are only based on authority, right? This is expressed in the biting anti. This is expressed in the biting antithesis of Hobbes's definition of law. Right. This is like almost the. This is almost. He says every man seeth that some laws are addressed to all subjects in general, some in particular provinces, and some in particular vocations, and some to particular men. And to an absolutist, it is obvious that law is not counsel, but command. Right. This is 33. I think this is elements of law. And we have to remember, yes, this is Leviathan. Leviathan, chapter 26, page 137 of the English edition of 1631. This is Schmitt refers here of civil laws chapter in Leviathan 26. And this is that very definition right to Leviathan. Very important in that sense, right? That in other words, every man, there are some laws that are addressed to all subjects in general, some particular. So laws like this, but all law is what? It's not counsel, but command. It's very interesting. So law kind of Hobbes kind of collapse the distinction between law and decree in that sense, right? That command, decree is just a command, and there's a difference between command and law. All laws are commands in Hobbes. And essentially authority is not, as the rationalist conception of law and the state law theories, truth and justice. Let's continue this, right? To a absolutist, and it is obvious law is not a counsel of command. Essentially authority, and not, as the rationalist conception of the law and Reichstag theories, truth and justice. Authoritas non veritas factus legum. Authority, not truth, makes law. Right, that's that line. Authority, not truth, makes law. And so therefore it's that, again, that's what Leviathan, right? Authority makes law, not truth. That's the difference between law and justice, right? Truth and justice is, truth and justice are tied there, but command makes it. And this is the difference between Reichstag, essentially absolutism and Reichstag, right? Reichstag believes it is truth in this balance that deals with this. Bolingbroke, who was a representative of the balance of power theories of government, thought in terms of the Reichstag, formulated the contrast as one of government by constitution and government by will. He distinguishes between constitutional and government, so that the Constitution constrains a system of rules that is always and at all times valid, whereas government was what actually occurred at any time. The one is unchanging, and the other changes with time and circumstance. Okay, this is 34. This is dissertation on parties, letter 10 of Bolingbroke, right? The theory of law as general will, a will that is valuable as such because of its general character, is in contrast to every particular will, which has which dominated political thought through the 17th and 18th centuries. Here can be understood as an expression of the concept of law in a Riksdag. Right? This is Rousseau's kind of idea of the general will. You can see Diderot. You can also see Diderot as there was a very good book. I don't know. It's Peter Kelly. Well, I think it's Peter Kelly. I don't remember. It's a very good book. I think it was Peter Kelly. Okay, Patrick Riley, The General Will Before Rousseau. Patrick Riley, 1986, Princeton. Very good book, explains how people like Concordat and other people came to that. This is that the idea of the general will is not simply just, it goes even back to Hobbes. We can say, right? We can say that. And it can be understood, this idea of the general will that is higher than particular will uh, 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 is, is, is understood as an expression of the concept of the law in Aristotle. Here, too, Concordat is the typical representative of enlightened radicalism, for whom everything concrete is only a case of the application of a general law. So therefore, everything else, this idea of concordat, everything is like this. There's a general law, there's general rules, and everything concrete is an emanation of it, right? Uh, every activity, the whole life of the state, according to Concordat, exhausts itself in law and the applications of law. Even the executive has only function of pronouncing a syllogism in which the law is a major premise, a more or less general fact in the minor premise. And the conclusion is the application of law, right? Justice is not. Justice is not only, as Montesquieu said, the mouth that pronounces the word of the law, but the administration as well. Again, this is 35, note 35 of here. I think, this on this extremely interesting examination of Joseph Barthelme's role of pouvoir and execution in the Republic of modern republics. Right, this is 1906. This is Schmitt, in fact, the the citation is taken from Concord's report on the Project Guerin in Archive Parliamentary, volume 58, 583, quoted by Barthélemy. Okay. This idea that out of the mouth pronounces the law, but administration as well. So it's not only law, but administration. In the design of the Gironda's Constitution of 1793, again, this is the kind of like in the French Republic, Girondists, this is one of the factions, right? This principle was to be firmly established as the distinguished characteristic of law. The characteristic that distinguishes the law is to be found in their generality and unlimited duration. 36, right? Again, this is a Schmitt note. So Tier 7, Section 2, Article 3 of this. In contrast to the laws the characteristic of decree are local or particular application and necessary to their being renewed after a certain period. The Constitution of June 21st, 1793, Articles 54 and 55, defined the concept of law in the unusual way according to the subject matter. So the subject matter. See, and he says, Leon Dignant and Henry Monsieur, the Constitution and the principles of the principles laws of the political laws of the French deputies of 1789, published 1915, page 52. Okay. So even the executive should no longer be command. Even the executive should no longer command, but only reason. The agent of the executive does not command; they reason. So this is that line, passing quote. The executive should no longer command, but only reason. The agents of the executive do not command; they reason. Right, the last example of the central systemic distinction of law and command is offered by Hegel's argument about the legal character of budget law. The so-called financial law is, despite the cooperation of the corporations, essentially a government prerogative, right? So therefore, again, this is very, this is this Hegel's idea that the idea of this, that even though the private people participate, it's still government prerogative, right? It's a government prerogative. It is thus inappropriately called a law because it embraces the widest and even complete extent of government, the means of and the means of government. No, it's called this law, this financial law, the so-called financial law is because it is thus inappropriate called a law because it embraces the widest and even completest extent of government, the means of government. A law passed each year for only a year will seem unreasonable even to some common men who distinguishes the substantial universality of true law from which is by its nature only a superficial superficial general, something that's superficially general superficial. So 37, Hegel's Encyclopedia, section 554. There were three editions of the encyclopedia. This paragraph does not appear in the first one, 1817, but was included in the Karl Rosenkrantz edition of 1870. The paragraph continues with a critical discussion of the concept on a check on government through the budget law, right? This idea of the budget law. It concludes by rejecting the theory of balance of power within the state as a contradiction to the fundamental idea of what a state is. Page 449 of the 1870 edition of Hegel's Encyclopedia. So that's a very interesting thing that the Schmitt Hegel is brought in here. Hegel is just taking the logic of this and saying that no, this is, when you do this, you call this. This is why you can't call budgets. Budgets are not law, is in a sense. They're a decision. There's commanding. It's a decision. It has this thing. It's the specific thing. It deals with this thing. To call it law is problematic in this sense, because law is general and not always the case. And he ends here. A law. Again, let's repeat that. He says, a law passed each year for only a year and seems unreasonable even to the common man who distinguishes the substantial universality of true law from that which is by nature only superficially general. So this is why this is that weird thing. This is Hegel quoting from the Encyclopedia. Schmitt quoting from Hegel's Encyclopedia entry on this, talking about the budgetary law, right? The German finance law, financial situation, the budget, how you budget things, and that the budget is not a law in this, and it's not a general principle, it's not a general thing. This is the problem and this shows the contradiction that law is a command, and that if you distinguish between these two things, and you blur that, then it creates a problem, right? This is why Hobbes is maybe the founder of this problem. This may be the thing. Hobbes may be the real reason that Locke and the tradition afterward tries to distinguish, but once the administrative structure has to take everything as decree, but decree, and as Schmitt talks in legality and legitimacy, then what happens is that you give absolute power to it in that sense. And remember, that's the legality and legitimacy book. So let's stop here. If you have any comments, questions, please put them below, and when I see them, I will respond to them. If you liked it, like it, please. If you liked what you see, hit the like button. If you've sent it, if you post on your social media, send it to your friends. I'll get hiccups. Send it to your friends and things like this. Get their attention. If you've not subscribed and you want to get, subscribe so that you get the messages of future videos coming up there, notifications and things like this. If you don't want notifications, well, so get notifications, subscribe. Also help build the channel up. I like to get to 500 soon. I like to get to 500. Let's go. We haven't, we've been stuck in the now 300s. We broke 300s. Now we're kind of stuck at the beginning point of 300. So let's move. I had to get to 500. So get your friends, encourage your friends who might be interested to join, subscribe, and like this. If you didn't like it, you can say, no, I didn't like it. I didn't like this. Say why in the comments. What criticism of something or problem with things. Um, if you want to follow me on social media, the links are linked below. If you want to look at you go check out my research and my status as an academic. In that sense, what I do in my academic research, you can follow my academic social media links below. And if you want to help me do what I do, and I want to be a sponsor, want to be a Patreon, by giving a little bit each month, like a buck or two each month, uh, uh, it would be nice in that sense. Oh, I would like to give you more. Well, contact me. I'll find a way that I can get. If you want to donate okay, I don't know how to do it, but if I can find a way to do it, I will do it. Okay. Um, please, it's going to everything can help right now because it's getting tight, and I was hoping to be a pay increase. We're not going to get. We got a pay increase already. I said, no, it's everything's getting so expensive. Okay, so that's that. You can other way you can help me is buy one of my books. The links below. Maybe you buy it for yourself, buy it for a friend or someone you know, a gift or something. A young student who's interested in these things. Um, that's it. Um, we do these posts, the Schmitt things Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that's it. We'll continue in part 4, and we'll look on this question of what continue Schmitt of the discussion of parliamentary. Okay. Okay. Take care. Bye bye.